Welcome. Today we're going to talk about one of the most talked about and perhaps misunderstood references in the Bible, the toes of the image seen by King Nebuchadnezzar and the prophet Daniel. In Daniel chapter 2, we read about Daniel and the king and the dream which the king had but could not remember. Daniel prays to be shown the dream and the interpretation, and the Lord answers his prayer. The dream is of an image with a head of gold, a breast and arms of silver, belly and thighs of brass, legs of iron, and feet and toes made of a mixture of iron and clay. A stone was then cut out of a mountain without hands, and smote the image upon its feet that were of iron and clay, and broke them to pieces. Whereupon the entire image of gold, silver, brass, iron, and clay was broken in pieces, and became as chaff blown away in the wind, and the stone became a great mountain that filled the earth. Daniel is shown and told that the image represents a series of kingdoms on the earth, with the head of gold being the kingdom of Nebuchadnezzar, which would be followed by other subsequent kingdoms which would bear rule over the earth, with the references to ores of lesser value and greater tensile strength than the head of gold. Biblical scholars have opined for many years about which kingdoms and dynasties are described by the image. Some of the potential candidates include the Medes, the Persians, the Greeks, and the Romans, with the feet of iron and toes possibly representing some combination of the nations of modern Europe or the European Union. Some point to the ministry of Jesus Christ as being the stone cut from the mountain without hands, which would destroy the kingdoms of the earth and replace them with a kingdom of God on the earth. Some of these people would point to the Roman Catholic Church or the Holy Roman Empire, which replaced the Roman Empire, represented by the legs and feet of iron and clay. To be honest, this makes sense to those who see modern Christianity as the result of an unbroken chain of religious devotion covering the past 2,000 years. And to be sure, there have certainly been devout and sincere Christians during that entire period of time, whether or not one believes in the, quote, infallibility, unquote, of the Pope or other Christian leaders and reformers. Might the prophet's vision have a second interpretation? Some believe that the dream has a specific reference to the second coming of Jesus Christ, when it is prophesied that he will rule and reign over the earth for 1,000 years. It has been prophesied that at that time, the nations of the earth, represented by the image's feet and toes of iron and clay, will be gathered together to fight against Israel with an army of 200 million, and that Jesus will come and set his foot on the Mount of Olives, which will cleave in two, and the earthly army will be destroyed, with their blood rising to the level of the horses' bridles. The wicked will be destroyed, Satan will be bound, and Jesus will reign over the righteous for 1,000 years on the earth. Are these the only reasonable interpretations? Or might there be yet another historical fulfillment of this prophetic dream? The Apostle Paul wrote to the Thessalonians that the day of Jesus' glorious return would not occur until after a falling away from the truth, when the man of sin, or the Antichrist, would be revealed. Some Christians point to the doctrinal differences between what is recorded in the New Testament Gospels and what is taught in the Roman Catholic Church as being evidence of such a falling away, which resulted in the Reformation and the creation of numerous Protestant Christian denominations and churches. This would be evidence that the full truth of the gospel may not have survived intact for the past 2,000 years. Now, that does not mean that the members of those churches are without sincere belief in God and Jesus, but only that there may be inconsistencies in what those people have been taught to believe. Christian churches around the world are currently experiencing a falling away even now, with individuals from the rising generations expressing less inclination to believe in God or attend church. Perhaps this is a repeat of the falling away that was referred to by Paul prior to the revealing of the Antichrist. The prophet Ezra was also shown a vision of the last days, in which he was told that his dream describe the same kingdom as the fourth one in the dream of Daniel. In some of my other videos, I described Ezra's eagle and how I believe it matches the United States of America. These two dreams also have some interesting implication when juxtaposed. In Daniel 2, verses 41 and 42, we read, "And whereas thou sawest the feet and toes, part of potter's clay and part of iron, the kingdom shall be divided, but there shall be in it of the strength of the iron, forasmuch as thou sawest the iron mixed with miry clay. And as the toes of the feet were part of iron and part of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly broken." So these verses describe the kingdom in question as being divided. Now, we refer to the United States as being united, but it can obviously be also described as being divided into 50 separate states, some of which are stronger than others, as each state has its own unique mix of economic, agricultural, natural, and human resources. Some are stronger than others. Daniel makes particular note of the toes of the feet here. So what do these toes represent, as opposed to the feet, or is it just all one and the same? Let us read on in verses 43 and 44. "And whereas thou sawest," and this is the Lord speaking to, or Daniel speaking to Nebuchadnezzar, "and whereas thou sawest iron mixed with miry clay, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men. But they shall not cleave one to another, even as iron is not mixed with clay. And in the days of these kings, shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom, which shall never be destroyed. And the kingdom shall not be left to other people, but it shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever." So verse 43 talks about the entities represented by the toes as mingling with the seed of men, which might be a reference to our form of government, where we have leaders and the people kind of mingling together, that we don't treat them as deities or anything like that. And then in verse 44 we read that the toes might represent kings or leaders of the nation represented by the feet of iron and clay. The words "in the days of these kings" could refer to all the kings of the kingdoms of the entire image, but it seems most logical that the kings being referred to are represented by the last part of the image referred to in verses 41 through 43, the toes, especially since the stone cut out without hands strikes the feet and toes of the image. Now, Ezra's eagle describes a series of 19 leaders of this nation, but Daniel's image seems to refer to toes, of which we might assume that there are only 10 as opposed to 19. Are these 10 a subset of the 19, or might they be somewhere else in the sequence of the 46 presidential administrations that we have had so far? In chapter 7 of Daniel, he describes another dream in which he sees 4 kingdoms represented by 4 beasts, as opposed to 4 that were part of one image. In this dream, the 4th beast is described as having 10 horns and teeth of iron. So there's some parallels there. There's 10 of something, and some component is iron-like, with the horns representing 10 kings that would arise in that kingdom. Okay? So it's one nation, so to speak, but 10 subsequent, or 10 leaders who will be in charge. Now, are the 10 toes of the image and the 10 horns of the final beast in these two dreams describing the same 10 kings in the same future nation? Could be. It's a paradigm. They're paradigms, so it might be describing the same nation. So here we go. In the history of the United States, was there an organization established by God which might be described by anyone or someone as being something akin to a kingdom of God on the earth? If so, when was it established? And how long did the process of establishing that kingdom take? Now, there are lots of religious organizations and churches which refer to themselves as being part of God's church, or even, quote, God's church all by themselves. But only 2 of those churches claim to have been literally established by Jesus Christ, with his authority to administer in sacred ordinances of the gospel, such as baptism and administering the Lord's Supper. The Catholic Church claims this authority was passed from Jesus to the Apostle Peter to the Bishop of the Church in Rome, which they claim was passed on in unbroken succession to subsequent bishops and popes. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints claims that the Church of Jesus Christ was restored to the earth under the direction of Jesus Christ in 1830, and that the priesthood authority was conferred upon Joseph Smith via the laying on of hands by the resurrected John the Baptist and the resurrected apostles Peter, James, and John, who received their apostolic priesthood authority under the hands of Jesus. No other Christian denomination has made such claims regarding divine authority. So the Gospels of Matthew and Luke each begin with stories of the familial background story behind the birth of Jesus. Matthew lists the ancestors of Joseph, the husband of Mary, who was the mother of Jesus. Joseph was a descendant of King David. Luke tells the story of angelic visitations, heavenly choirs, and visiting shepherds and wise men. And so if we were to tell the story of how a stone might be cut out of a mountain without hands, such as was the case with the story of the ministry of Jesus, it might make some sense to include the origins of a family wherein a child was born, who was instrumental in the stone cutting. Now, the first 10 presidents of the United States served from the year 1789 through the year 1845, or to the year of 1845. Joseph Smith's parents, the one who was instrumental in the forthcoming of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, Joseph Smith's parents were married and started their family during the presidential administration of George Washington, the first U.S. president. Joseph Smith was born during the administration of Thomas Jefferson, the third president. His first vision, in which he says that he saw God the Father and his Son Jesus Christ, occurred during the administration of James Monroe, the fifth president. He translated the Book of Mormon during the administration of John Quincy Adams, the sixth president. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints was formally organized during the administration of Andrew Jackson, the seventh president. Joseph Smith continued to receive revelations concerning the establishment and organization of the church until his martyrdom during the administration of John Tyler, the 10th president. By that time, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints appears to have been fully organized. It has not as yet replaced all the kingdoms of the earth in accordance with Daniel's dream, but it is a worldwide organization with over 16 million members located on every continent of the world. Am I saying that these are the only possible manifestations of this prophetic dream being fulfilled in human history? Certainly not. And I am not even saying that the events that I have described were the ones God intended to communicate to King Nebuchadnezzar and the prophet Daniel. But I believe that prophecy is often fulfilled in multiple ways during different eras of the world's history. And these are a few periods in history that just might fit the paradigm of the prophecy. It has been observed by some that history repeats itself. A more recent analogy I heard was that history does not necessarily repeat itself, but that it rhymes in subsequent iterations. I like this statement as it allows for paradigms to be applied to different situations in ways that we might not have considered before, like the one I've just talked about. Once again, if you have ideas that you think might pertain to Daniel's dream of the image of the nations in chapter 2 or the 4 beasts of chapter 7, I would love to hear from you. Thank you for taking the time to listen today. Have a wonderful day and keep watching. Bye.